Moscow was loud, but underneath the noise there was tension, not the chaotic kind, the kind that settles into the chest when history is close. Two undefeated fighters stood in the ring, both believing the night belonged to them. Murat Gassiev carried the aura of destruction. Every opponent before him had eventually folded under the weight of his power. Heavy hands, planted feet, ruthless pressure. Oleksandr Usyk carried something different. No intimidation, no wasted motion, just calm. He had crossed continents for fights, embraced hostile crowds, and trusted something deeper than strength, his mind. This was the World Boxing Super Series final. All the belts, one champion. And the question hanging in the air wasn't who hit harder, it was whether intelligence could survive sustained violence. As the referee gave final instructions, the contrast was already clear. Gassiev stood still, coiled, ready to detonate. Usyk bounced lightly, eyes scanning, already calculating angles before the first bell. This wasn't just Ukraine versus Russia. This was pressure versus freedom. The bell rang, and from the opening seconds the tone felt unusual. No wild exchanges, no ego, just a southpaw jab flicking like a probe, testing distance, stealing rhythm. Gassiev stalked forward, confident, patient, waiting for the moment to set his feet and unleash the power that had ended so many nights early. But Usyk didn't give him that moment, not once. Every step, every pivot, every jab carried intention. This wasn't about winning early. This was about control, and control is the most dangerous weapon in boxing. As the early rounds unfolded, something subtle began to reveal itself. Gassiev was throwing punches with bad intentions, but Usyk was never where he expected him to be. Each time Gassiev stepped forward, Usyk slid just outside range, snapping a jab, circling away before danger could form. The movement wasn't flashy, it was disciplined, efficient, relentless. Gassiev's power required stillness. His punches were built to travel through the canvas, up the legs, into the fist. Usyk kept removing the ground beneath him. Every missed shot drained a little more energy, a little more confidence. The jab wasn't just scoring points, it was disrupting timing, breaking patterns, forcing resets. When Gassiev finally found moments to attack, Usyk responded with combinations, not force, then disappeared again. The crowd waited for the thunder, for that one punch that would change everything, but it never came. Instead, frustration began to creep in. Gassiev threw more, pressed harder, chased angles that weren't there. Usyk, meanwhile, looked like he was warming into the fight. His feet glided. His defense turned into offense without effort. He wasn't reacting, he was anticipating. This is where elite boxing lives, in the space before the punch is thrown. By the fourth and fifth rounds, the fight had a rhythm, and it belonged entirely to Usyk. Gassiev was fighting the man in front of him. Usyk was fighting the future, planning 3 movements ahead. The gap between power and precision was widening, and the longer it lasted, the more dangerous it became for the puncher. By the middle rounds, the fight had shifted from physical to psychological. Gassiev was still strong, still dangerous, but something had changed. His punches came faster but less clean. His pressure increased, but his accuracy dropped. He was trying to force solutions instead of building them. Usyk noticed everything. He began to add layers, feints, pauses, sudden bursts of combinations that snapped Gassiev's head back before vanishing again. This wasn't about hurting him. It was about reminding him who was in control. Each missed power shot came with a cost. Gassiev's breathing grew heavier. His shoulders tightened. His corner urged patience, but patience is hard to maintain when your greatest weapon refuses to land. Usyk, on the other hand, looked untouched physically and mentally. He talked during exchanges, smiled after escapes. His confidence grew visibly with every round. This is the cruel truth of boxing. Fatigue doesn't always come from damage. Sometimes it comes from failure, from chasing something you can't reach. Gassiev landed moments, solid body shots, heavy hooks, but never enough to change the tide. Usyk absorbed, adjusted, and kept moving. The fight had become a lesson unfolding in real time. Power without position meant nothing. Pressure without control led nowhere. And as the championship rounds approached, it was clear this was no longer a contest of strength. It was a demonstration. A slow, surgical breakdown of a dangerous opponent who simply couldn't solve the puzzle in front of him. In the later rounds, Oleksandr Usyk elevated from technician to artist. His footwork became lighter, his combinations sharper, his timing cruelly precise. Gassiev still came forward, brave, determined, but every attempt was met with angles, counters, and immediate exits. Usyk didn't admire his work. He never lingered. Punch, pivot, reset, over and over. The jab continued to dictate everything, snapping Gassiev's head just enough to break momentum. When Gassiev tried to slow him with body shots, Usyk responded with flurries upstairs, forcing him back again. This wasn't dominance through damage, it was dominance through denial, denying space, denying balance, denying confidence. The crowd, once roaring for the puncher, began to fall into stunned quiet, watching a fighter they expected to impose his will slowly realize it wasn't possible. Usyk's conditioning shined brightest here. Where others would slow, he accelerated. Where others would protect a lead, he pressed intelligently. He wasn't running, he was commanding. Each round ended with Gassiev returning to his corner, frustrated, marked by effort, while Usyk sat calmly, breathing evenly, listening, already prepared for the next lesson. This was boxing stripped to its highest form: awareness, adaptability, and execution. No knockdowns, no drama, just superiority expressed through control. By the time the final round approached, the outcome felt inevitable. Not because Gassiev quit, but because Usyk never gave him permission to succeed. When the final bell rang, there was no explosion, only recognition. Recognition of something rare. Oleksandr Usyk raised his arms, not in relief but in quiet satisfaction. He had done exactly what he set out to do. Against one of the most dangerous punchers in the division in hostile territory with every title on the line, he had boxed a near-perfect fight. The scorecards reflected what the eyes already knew. This was unanimous, undeniable, historic. Usyk became the first undisputed cruiserweight champion, not by overpowering his opponent, but by outthinking him at every stage. Gassiev, gracious in defeat, embraced him, a silent acknowledgement of greatness. This fight didn't end with a knockout replayed endlessly on highlight reels. It ended with something more lasting, a blueprint. A reminder that boxing, at its highest level, is a thinking man's game. That movement can neutralize violence. That intelligence, discipline, and preparation can dismantle raw power. Years from now, fighters will still study this performance, not for how to knock someone out, but for how to make them miss, doubt, and fade. On this night in Moscow, Oleksandr Usyk didn't just win belts, he redefined dominance.